And Martin Shkreli and Elizabeth Holmes have been the talk of the financial world. Holmes, the founder of the Silicon Valley blood testing startup Theranos, became famous after promising investors that her company could detect a myriad of health problems from a drop of blood. Shkreli, the so-called pharma bro, gained notoriety for jacking up the price of a life-saving drug in the name of profits. Both were accused of fraud by the SEC. But unlike Shkreli, who was sentenced to 7 years in prison, Holmes settled the charges. She agreed to pay a $500,000 fine and is now barred from serving as an officer or director of a public company for 10 years. But are there differing outcomes fair under the law? Attorney and former federal prosecutor Emily Compagno is in Seattle. So, Emily, it seems that both of them were accused of fraud. Why the discrepancy in their punishments?
Right. There are a few reasons here. Now, first, it's difficult when you're taking these large-scale SEC fraud investigations and cases to analyze them as like entities because, frankly, they're not. But there are a few indicators within them that allow us to see patterns. And one of them, frankly, is defendant remorse. And we saw in Mr. Shkreli an absence of that. We actually saw a hubris, right? He was taunting. And that goes a long way in terms of what we see later as maximums. That plays into prosecutorial discretion. And another, which does as well, is going to trial. If you were to take a sampling of the white-collar fraud defendants or prisoners, the inmates incarcerated right now, the ones with the long sentences are the ones that went to trial. But I do want viewers to understand, too, that this is just one portion of the investigation against Elizabeth Holmes, and that, remember, the criminal investigation is separate. The SEC will not comment on it, but it's probably ongoing, and likely she signed a tolling agreement, so there's no rush on their part. They've also stated that they are pursuing and prosecuting Sunny Balwani, the former president of Theranos, in California District Court. So we have that in play, too. The line that Martin Shkreli is at, they have not reached it yet in the Theranos case. And finally, I'd like to say that fundamentally, there are disparities in fraud cases. And again, it goes into that kind of complexity that we see. It's difficult to state at any level of the situation whether that analysis is actually equal based on factors that are just out of their control. When they're so complex like that, short of specific precedent, there's a lot of things that happen. There was just a large California white-collar fraud case. Actually, there were 3 defendants. 2 women, 1 man, and he was on the hook for $9 million, but he got they had half of the sentence that he did for 1/90th of the amount owed. And the point here is that the discrepancy, it's not gender, it can be anything, but again, it's prosecutorial discretion.
So what was interesting in the case of Shkreli, the court had a really hard time finding an unbiased juror, unbiased jurors. Had he already been found guilty in the court of public opinion, and could that have impacted potentially the case's outcome?
100%. Public opinion matters, and especially in this day and age where everyone has a voice on social media and where we kind of see these tidal waves of social media voices, it can absolutely play into effect. And that is why it's so crucial behind the scenes to ensure that you have that impartiality on both the prosecutors and also the negotiation team on behalf of the defendant. And again, that's also why going to trial it's such a wild card for the defendant, frankly. And sometimes when you're being faced with a plea deal offered by prosecution and no one wants to go to prison and no one wants to accept this, the confirmation that they had accepted this charge, but ultimately, sometimes in the long run, it's so much better because it removes those other variables, and then you can be done with it. But now, again, Shkreli faced 7 years, and we'll see what comes up home in her case, but the criminal case remains to be seen. But as of now, obviously, she's not facing anything.
Yeah, and a plea deal may seem so harsh at first, but then when the jury comes back and the ultimate deal is made, that can be even harsher. Emily Compagno in Seattle, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.